All right. Is it time for me to do my first ever tier list? Is it time? I've never done a tier list before. All right. What are we doing a tier list on? The updated tank tier list. The updated tank tier list. All right. It's happening. So, first tier list we're doing. This is an updated tier list for essentially the last 3 weeks of Season 1 of Overwatch 2. Obviously, we just recently saw Zarya and D.Va essentially kind of be in the S tier. Just recently, we saw some changes to Zarya, and we saw some changes to D.Va. With Zarya, we saw the shields, the timing on the shields go from 2.5 seconds down to 2 seconds. And we also saw Zarya's cooldown go up to 11 seconds from 10 seconds. I'll go into a little bit of detail when I put Zarya in like the new tier I think Zarya's at. With D.Va, we saw I'm trying to remember this without seeing the patch notes. The booster damage go from 25 to 15. You get your remech quicker though as baby D.Va by 12%. The D.Va changes 3.5 to 3.75, which means there's a bit more spread, which means that like the area that D.Va shoots at will be a little bit like larger and kind of like a little bit more all over the place. Still going to be pretty accurate though. So essentially D.Va got nerfed, Zarya got nerfed. Now there's going to be some other heroes here that move up on a tier list in my opinion because of other changes to Sombra. We're going to start with Ball. I also want to point out, and just I want to make this clear for like when we do future tier lists or like I talk about like what heroes I think are strong on maps or things like that in general. I think that pretty much every hero right now is playable. Straight up. But there's going to be some heroes that excel better in metas that can play better. But just because you play like some of the heroes on this tier list doesn't mean that you can't play those heroes. I know I just won a game on Junker Queen in ranked, right? So just to point out that these heroes can be played, you know, just because, you know, there's going to be, I think there's going to be at least one D tier hero here. That hero is still playable. All right. So here we go. We're going to start with Wrecking Ball. Now, this is a tough one to say. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I might put Ball in D tier right now. Hear me out as to why. I feel like in the current meta, especially with Sojourn being super strong, I feel like Wrecking Ball just isn't played a lot. Like, Ball just doesn't... I don't know what it is, but like, Ball just charges up Sojourn quickly. There just isn't as much time. And do I think Ball is good? Ball's okay right now. I think Ball's okay right now, but like, I don't think Ball gets a lot of play time in comparison to other tanks. Obviously, I think if you're really good at Wrecking Ball, you can move Wrecking Ball up to like C or B tier if you're insanely good at Ball. But if we're really looking at like, for example, I played a game earlier and like against a Wrecking Ball, and you could just tell that Wrecking Ball is in a spot where maybe there'll be changes eventually, or maybe with a meta shift. I think here's the thing about Wrecking Ball. I think with an actual meta shift, the Wrecking Ball could easily just go up to B tier, right? It could be as simple as a meta shift. Because just recently, Wrecking Ball was meta during the beta. And then now that Sojourn's super strong, and obviously Sombra just got nerfed, right? You know, you might see Wrecking Ball move up to B tier with meta changes. But as of right now, with Sojourn still being good, it's like, yeah, you can play Wrecking Ball. Ball's not bad in a sense, but like I think it's gonna be very meta based right now for Ball. And keep in mind, the meta changes a lot with each rank. So if someone's like, hey, you know, I'm playing in Bronze right now, can I play Ball? Yes, you can play Ball. I think you'll be fine. All right, next one, I'm gonna go with D.Va. I think a lot of people want to know where D.Va's at now. As we know, most tier lists are putting D.Va in S tier. I used to kind of explain it as like Zarya was S plus tier and then D.Va was S minus tier. Obviously with the recent changes to D.Va, which we just talked about earlier, and then the changes to Zarya, I'm gonna put D.Va in A tier. I play a lot of D.Va. But the reason why I have D.Va in A tier is that the changes to D.Va don't really make D.Va that much worse, and the D.Va's defense matrix is still so good that with the flight, with, you know, just basically D.Va's kit is so good still. D.Va's kit is so good still that I keep D.Va at A tier. Keep in mind, that there is an argument that D.Va could still be S tier, but I do want to point out that with the little bit of the booster damage reduction and the spread damage, it's gonna make it so it's a little bit, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to be able to like have that 1v1 up against like a DPS, right? So I would say, yes, you could definitely say like A+. You could still maybe be in that S- category for D.Va, but I'm going to kind of go with the safe pick here and put D.Va into A tier. I think D.Va is still really good. I mean, overall, when it comes to balance, I think what they would prefer is to have everything in A or below tier than have like S tier. But don't you worry. There is at least one S tier tank. All right? One S tier tank. Sigma. As you know, I love playing Sigma. I've talked about Sigma. I think Sigma is a very good hero. But as of right now, as much as I want to put Sigma in the A tier or the S tier, I am leaning a bit towards B tier. Now, I'm going to explain why. All right? Let me explain why. Oh, keep in mind with every single like tier we go through, I'm going to explain as to why I think it's there. Sigma does a lot of damage. You've probably seen some of my videos. I'll talk about Sigma's damage. Sigma has a lot of damage. Sigma has a shield. All right? Sigma has good cooldowns. Okay? But one thing Sigma doesn't have right now, especially in some of the meta that we're seeing or some of the team comps we're seeing, is Sigma is like one of the few heroes that doesn't have the mobility that other heroes have. Like if we go across the whole hero list right now, Sigma doesn't have that mobility. So Sigma is still a very, very, very good tank. And once again, I think if this was like, if we had this like split into like A+ tier, B+ tier, I think Sigma would very much be B+. And we're talking like an 89. You know what I mean? Like, I think Sigma's damage output alone can allow for Sigma to like carry games and win a bunch of games. Also keep in mind that I'm going up against like, in a lot of the games I'm going against a Sojourn that's just dominating, right? And sometimes I need to be on heroes with more mobility to be able to help my teammates against that Sojourn, right? But don't get me wrong. You go Sigma right now and your rank games and you have good positioning, you have good shield usage, you have great cooldown usage, I'm gonna be honest with you, you're probably gonna have a good time on Sigma. But for me overall in the current meta, I put Sigma at the B tier, but I think Sigma's very good. I think Sigma's very good. All right? B tier is where I have Sigma at, though. All right? Next tank. Okay. This one, I think people are going to agree on or disagree on. I think this is going to be a discussion. I'm going to go with Reinhardt next. I think we have our first C tier. I think we have our first C tier. I'm going to explain why. I'm going to explain why. All right? I think in some ranks, Rein is really good. Why? A fun hero to play. You have a lot more... Oh, did you? Oh, there you go. Rein is fun to play. You have your shield. Right? There's a lot there where Rein can play, has a lot of fun to it. The shield especially. And the team will play behind the shield. Rein plays really well with Lucio, but Lucio isn't the team comps. It's just that there's a lot of comps right now that work really well. And let me explain it a little bit, right? And yeah, somebody said that right, in your rank B. That's why I think like the discussion about where Reinhardt is, and this is a discussion we're having with chat, right? I think some people will absolutely believe that Rein is in B tier, and some people will believe Rein is in C tier, and I think both are right. Honestly, I think Rein is not like D tier or like F tier, right? But Rein is in a spot where Rein just doesn't... I think like as... I'm trying to think of a good way to explain it with Rein. A lot of other heroes now have the ability to put out a lot of damage output. And Rein's playstyle is really good for like, hey, I'm going to protect my team. I'm going to put my shield here. And we're going to go from there, right? But right now, Rein going up against, like, we have Sigma in B tier right now. We have D.Va in A tier, right? We have other tanks that are going to be going up there. I mean, I know a lot of people have been saying it, like, going against Orisa can be tough sometimes. Now, I don't know necessarily who wins the Rein-Orisa matchup as much because I don't really play against Rein that much in ranked. But the few times I've gone up against a Rein as Orisa, it doesn't feel awful. It doesn't feel awful at all. It feels like I can go Orisa against a Rein and play fairly well. Once again, the reason why I want to reiterate this, it's very much rank dependent, right? So like the experience of Rein in some ranks can be a lot different than ranks. For example, like sometimes I can only go off of what I'm seeing with Rein right now in my rank, and Rein just doesn't play that well in ranked. Granted, there are some really good Rein players, but I think like the really good Rein players play really aggressive, and they're like, I mean really aggressive. Like they're charging in, like they're timing everything, like there's a lot there. But I think with the current meta, with Sojourner being a strong, I have Rein at C tier. All right. Can we argue Rein's B tier? Yes. Is Rein B tier probably in a lot of ranks? Yes. For me personally, I got to go with Rein C tier. I think Rein will have moments though where Rein will go up, and I think the meta once again can shift based off of, you know, it could be as simple as them adding 25 armor to Rein. I'm not even kidding you. We've seen that. Whenever you add armor to Rein, Rein dominates for a bit. All right, next one. Chat, one of my favorite heroes to play. Absolutely love playing this hero. So fun. It's Junker Queen time. And chat. D tier. Let me explain. They nerfed Junker Queen. They didn't rebuff Junker Queen after they nerfed Junker Queen. Junker Queen's kit was designed around Command and Shout. They realized that Command and Shout combined with other abilities doesn't really do well when stacked. So they nerfed Junker Queen, didn't give Junker Queen any buffs elsewhere, which then in turn made Junker Queen become one of the just probably currently right now might be the worst tank. There could be some arguments on that one. I like playing Junker Queen. I have a ton of fun playing Junker Queen. For anybody who likes the bingo videos, we have a Junker Queen bingo card going out, I think this weekend. Junker Queen is fun. I can't wait for them to buff Junker Queen because I feel like whenever they do buff Junker Queen, it's going to be a ton of fun. I love the play style. But right now, Junker Queen is in D tier. Still, I play Junker Queen. I will play Junker Queen sometimes, and I have a lot of quick play on Junker Queen. I play Junker Queen in ranked, and I've won a good amount of games, but I think Junker Queen's at a spot where it will take some time and some buffs for Junker Queen to move up on that tier list, but you know, I think Junker Queen's a couple slight buffs away from maybe going up to B tier. But right now, to give you an idea what happened is that basically Junker Queen would stack Command and Shout with Brig and Lucio in team comps. Everybody would have overshields and nothing would happen. There was just too many overshields for things to happen, so they nerfed Command and Shout to compensate for that, but they didn't give any other buffs elsewhere, which made it so that Junker Queen just was not able to actually make plays or do anything because Command and Shout was nerfed so hard. So Command and Shout was a huge part of Junker Queen's kit. Now they have to find a way to make Command and Shout better for, like, you know, Junker Queen, or better for, like, just better in general, or increase damage, adjust other stuff. So Junker Queen's in a spot where they nerfed Junker Queen really hard to shift that meta, and they haven't come back with buffs yet to compensate for those nerfs. So once that happens, I think Junker Queen will do pretty well. I also think Junker Queen is extremely fun to play. So that's why D tier. That's my take. Next tank we're going to go with is, I think this is a good one to start with. So Zarya used to be the S+ tier tank. As you know, Zarya was super strong. I'm going to be honest with you. I really do believe that Zarya is now A tier. I'm going to explain this in a minute as to why Zarya is now A tier. First of all, the biggest issue with Zarya, all right? The biggest issue with Zarya that was happening in people's rank games is that you had to make a decision. It used to be with Zarya that the decision was, I can break the bubble, and then we can use abilities on them, right? Or I can wait out the bubble and then use my abilities. What ended up happening with Zarya? There was no, like, decision that you could make that would If you charge Zarya, if you charge Zarya, Zarya's going to go in and roll your team, right? If you don't charge Zarya, Zarya has so much map control on you now that your team has no space, and then Zarya eventually gets charged anyway because their bubbles regen, and Zarya just dominates the game, right? That's what was happening. I mean, and eventually we saw that early on, people played a lot of Zarya. So the nerf, which was making it so you have to wait an extra second for the shield, gives you a little bit more time, right? Gives you a little bit more time to be able to get damage on Zarya. And then Zarya now has essentially one less, say you do back-to-back bubbles, you essentially have one less second now of Zarya being able to just run at your team. What do you mean by one less second? Well, it was 2.5 seconds. You have 2 bubbles, that's 5 seconds. You take that away to 2 seconds, that's now 4 seconds. So even if Zarya double bubbles himself, now it's 4 seconds instead of 5. That gives you more time to set up, make that decision, and get the opportunity to take Zarya. You know, I mean, to basically, you know, get the elim on Zarya or figure out what you want to do as a team. That 1 second, it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but believe it or not, when it comes to that type of play style, especially with the way Zarya was playing, this puts Zarya down into A tier. All right? This puts Zarya down into A tier. I think Zarya's still good. If you're sitting here going, wait, I play a lot of Zarya. Honestly, if you were dominated on Zarya, you're still probably going to be able to play pretty well on Zarya. All right? Zarya's still good. But what the idea of these changes that Blizzard made was they wanted it to make it so Zarya and D.Va were not in this S tier category, which don't get me wrong, there are some S tier tanks or tank, depends, I'll decide. But I like having Zarya here. I like having D.Va here. I think they're both good. I think they're both still playable, and I think Zarya will still do really well in games, but you have a little bit more opportunity as a player now if you're not playing Zarya to make a play on their Zarya. Next, Doomfist. All right, chat. This might be a hot take. This might be a hot take. Hear me out. Hear me out. This could be a hot take. All right, chat? This could be a hot take. But I think a lot of people expect me to put Doomfist in D tier. I think with the Sombra change, if you can play Doomfist well, or have a good understanding of how to play Doomfist, because of the Sombra change, Doomfist, if played well, can move up to the C tier. I think Doomfist, if played well, can move up to the C tier now. From D tier. Because Sombra was like the #1 counter. But I might change this a little bit later. Alright? So, same thing with Wrecking Ball? No. I honestly, going up against good Doomfist now, one thing I'm realizing is that when you're able to actually charge up your punch a lot and you're able to go in and then really time your cooldowns correctly, you constantly charge people against walls. Like, the amount of CC you can have with Doom can be really good. Once again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Doom is amazing by any means, and I wouldn't think... I know they've talked about, like, the possibility of buffing Doom and things like that. Absolutely, Doom needs a buff. To point out, I think Wrecking Ball might need one, or might just be fine with meta shifts, and I think Jungle Queen needs one, right? But, I think Doom moves up a little bit on that list. I might change this in a second, though, so we might have to circle back the Doomfist on this list, because I just realized something thinking about this. After this. You'll see, though. Orisa. This is a tough one. This is a tough one. Yeah, I want to say B tier. I want to say B tier, but I think that's going to be argued because I feel like a lot of players are seeing Orisa do well, and we're also seeing Orisa get a bit of contenders play time. And the reason being is because Orisa has so much survivability, right? So my biggest decision here is Orisa in B tier or A tier. And here's my argument to B and A tier. B tier because obviously with Sojourn being strong and, you know, there's certain comps that could do well against Orisa. Orisa might not do that well. But at the same time, the survivability of Orisa, if you take away Orisa's ultimate, which is like, okay, Orisa's survivability, as well as like the hitbox on that spear right now, it's like, It's a hard decision on whether or not Orisa's B or A tier. What if we put Orisa in B tier, but like B plus? Kind of like at that same level as Sigma, but like there's obviously an argument for like A minus because you still have that survivability. I feel like that's where I want to put Orisa. And don't get me wrong, I know Orisa can be played really well, but I also feel like Orisa could be like, it's either or. I'm going to go with B tier. I still think there can be an argument for A tier here, and I'm sure that like in the comments people will mention like, oh, Orisa's really good. I like Orisa, and I play Orisa fairly well, and I have a pretty decent win rate on Orisa now because Orisa's just like, the survivability in Orisa is so fun. Plus, if you haven't tested it yet, go test the Javelin hitbox, like in the trainer range on like the heroes. The Javelin hitbox is actually extremely large, so you actually can get really good Javelins across the map. All right. But I think B's here. Okay, we're gonna circle back to Doomfist now. I'm putting Doomfist in D tier. Hear me out. I think the Somber change is gonna help Doomfist. All right. I feel like it's going to help Doomfist, but I feel like there's a couple heroes that are just going to absolutely still dominate Doomfist. And at this point, Doomfist needs buffs in general for like a lot of players. As we've seen, there are some really good Doomfist players, and I've gone up against some great Doomfist players on ladder. And if this was like purely a top 500, if this was purely a top 500 tier list, I probably would still move Doomfist up to like C tier if it was like a purely top 500. But I think across all ranks, I think Doomfist at D tier is absolutely like just D tier right now. All right. So that's my take. So we're going to put Doomfist at D tier. If for some reason we start seeing Doomfist do well over the next few weeks, though, could have been C tier too. All right. We have 2 tanks left, chat. We have Roadhog and we have Winton. This one, I'm going to explain why. Are you ready? This is going to be based off of multiple things. Are you ready, chat? Absolutely S tier. Hear me out in a minute on this. Winton is S tier. All right, and I'm going to explain why. The bubble right now is so good. And against Sojourn comps, the sight lines that bubble can block are so good. You go, well, can't you just go Reaper against that comp? Keep in mind, the meta comp actually had Reaper in the same comp as Winton. Why does that work? We'll talk about that a little bit. It's the team synergy. The meta comp, the team synergy works really well. It just does. The sight lines, the ability to get out, all of that. On top of that, people go, well, what about Roadhog? You know, what about these heroes? With Kiriko still being as good as Kiriko is, there's a lot of opportunity for even on the hook for Kiriko to use Suzu on Winton, and Winton can just jump out. Right? I've played comps or games where like Winton has been, even I don't have that comp, a lot of it's just the playstyle. You have a good bubble, you get out, you're good to go. Keep in mind though, like there are counters, and it has to be played correctly, but right now, I can only, I'm going off of what I've seen with Winton. Winton can be very good. Now, obviously, that can change based off of like how your team's playing, what your team comp is. Like if, for example, you get like a Mercy Lucio comp, I don't know if Winton will work as well during that comp, right? There just isn't enough healing. Well, technically it could work. You can get rezzed. So like, there's that, right? But I don't think the comp will work as well because you just don't have enough healing there. You're not really synergizing with a lot of your team. So I would say that there's certain comps where Winton won't work, but like as of right now in Overwatch 2, what we've seen a lot of the time is straight up Winton has been one of the strongest tanks, if not one of the strongest tanks. Straight up. So on top of that, you still have the right click. Keep in mind when you have a Kiriko on your team also. Kiriko's ultimate synergizes so well with Winton. And keep in mind, some of these decisions on the tier list are also going to be based off of synergy with your team, right? You can get like what, 3 bubbles during Kitsune? You can just bubble off everybody, right? But yes, Winton is good. Sojourn is really good, and that's why you have to go Winton to counter Sojourn. Straight up. Straight up. That's why. Winton counters Sojourn. And when I say counter Sojourn, I don't mean like hard counters. Winston helps. Let me rephrase that. Winston helps against Sojourn. Winston does not hard counter Sojourn. The bubble helps against Sojourn. It's the bubble. All right? It's the bubble. Doesn't mean that Winston can easily 1v1, but to give you an idea, in OWL, a lot of the play style was straight up, you just solo ult Sojourn as Winston. That's all you do. When you have ult as Winston, you straight up just solo ult Sojourn. Even if you don't get Sojourn, that's what you do. That's the comp. So, yep, that's why Winston's S tier. I know some people will be like, well, you know, I go up against Reaper and a lot of it is about your bubble timing, right? Like, don't just jump in and bubble as Winston. You have a little bit more HP now to be able to jump in, do a little bit of damage, and time your bubbles. Last but not least, Roadhog. This is an interesting one, and I'm going to go and explain why Hog is where I have Hog at. This is going to be kind of an interesting topic because I think people are going to... I have an idea of where some of the discussion on Roadhog will be. Okay? S tier. People are going to look at this S tier and be like, wait, you have Winston and you have Roadhog in S tier. How does that work? How does that work? So, as we've recently seen, in contenders, we're seeing more Roadhog comps. Now, there was also discussion about how they tried Roadhog initially during OWL, and it just wasn't working as well. But we're seeing a lot more Roadhog comps. But we're also seeing Winston comps, and apparently both comps are somewhat working. Obviously, we can only see what contenders is happening with that. Why is Hog good? Okay? Why is Hog good right now on this tier list? I'll explain. One, I've talked about the Winston comp, right? So if Winston and like Reaper are meta, right? And Reaper still isn't able to get that full value against Winston, well, which hero can break a bubble fast and at least help break the bubble to enable their Sojourn to pop off? What's the one hero that can do that consistently? Roadhog. What ultimate synergizes extremely well with Kiriko? Roadhog's ultimate. What abilities during that ultimate can you use well? You can hook multiple times. You can heal yourself multiple times. Let's continue on with that discussion. Why is Roadhog good right now? Well, this goes back to the Sojourn discussion. You really can't get one-shot by Sojourn. Now, I talked about it earlier. You can get your teammates one-shot because you definitely know that if you have a Roadhog on your team, that Sojourn's going to be fully charged the whole time. That's not going to change one bit. Hey, that's not going to change one bit. The whole time, Sojourn's going to be charged up the whole time, but Roadhog can survive against a one-shot. Roadhog has good synergy with the team. Although, I'm pretty sure most Roadhogs probably will be on the flank, as we've probably seen, right? Like, most Roadhogs will be on the flank, as we've probably seen. So, Hog is going to be on, in my opinion, S tier for this current patch. Do I think that can change in a new meta? Absolutely. Absolutely. But Roadhog right now is getting more playtime. Roadhog has good survivability. Roadhog has good damage. And then we go to the other side of that. Winston is still really good. If you have a Winston against a Roadhog, you might switch. You might not have to. It really depends on how your teammates are playing. There's a lot there. One of the problems is that sometimes when you make a tier list, it's really hard to like get it all the way down to like, this is the exact tier list. All this. My take on this, every single hero here is playable, right? Every single hero here is playable. I want to reiterate that one more time. Whenever I do tier lists, that's always going to be the case. But I'm seeing a lot of these heroes be really strong right now. I don't think they're going to like look at this tier list or like they're going to like this, even if this is the tier list, I don't think they're going to go nerf Winston and like nerf Roadhog right away. I don't think Roadhog will specifically be that. So, yeah. So, that's my take on this. That's my tier list. I'm fairly happy with it. Like I said, there's some arguments where Ryan can move up to B tier. Sigma can move up to A tier. You know, some ranks you can move Winston down to A tier, but I don't even think that's the case. You could maybe move Doom up to C tier, depending on like, you know, what rank and how good the Doom player is. Obviously, if you play a hero extremely well, there's a good chance you're going to be able to climb quite a bit, regardless of what your rank is, right? Like, honestly, if you're playing Doomfist and in bronze and you're playing Doomfist extremely well, you'll probably be able to climb regardless of like what's happening in game. But I would say this is, I'm pretty happy with this tier list. I'm pretty happy with this tier list for tanks. I think this is a good updated tier list. I think once again, play what you want with this, but I'm pretty happy with it. Oh, that's one more discussion about Roadhog. I know people are going to say, well, I'm just going to go Ana. I'm just going to go Ana. Like, I can counter Hog with Ana. So, talk about that a little bit. Kiriko. Kiriko can literally wake up Hog. Kiriko can stop nade. You can literally cleanse the nade. You can cleanse the sleep. Kiriko helps a ton against Ana. You can still play Ana, don't get me wrong. Like, if you're in a game and they especially don't have a Kiriko and you go Ana, yeah, it'll make it a little bit easier to go against a Hog. But overall, because of Kiriko will be able to counter that. So, yeah. All right, that's my take. I hope you enjoyed the tier list. And if you want me to do more stuff like this, let me know. All right? Because I'm really curious on what people have to think about. Kind of like, this is kind of one of my first times actually like posting like my thoughts on Overwatch and like kind of going in depth about stuff. So, that's my tier list. Yeah.